obviously the team is overperforming, or not overperforming. They are far exceeding expectations from the start of the season. I mean, they were the first in the Eastern Conference for a majority of the entire year up until about 2 weeks ago, right? And so with that comes, okay, they're going to be, they're going to get a shot at, going on maybe a playoff run. And obviously you don't want to mortgage the future too early, right? Because you've got such great young players in Crate and Waslin and things like that. But there becomes an awkward conversation right around this time, because once the deadline hits, if the Ice Dogs, what do you do with Loshko and Van Vliet? Because while, yes, we will more than likely make the playoffs, because it looks like Peterborough is, again, their start was just so hard to overcome. They've been playing great hockey, though. They're in a lot of games, so it's not like they're a complete pushover. And they just beat the Ice Dogs, who were, again, leading the division.
And they beat Saginaw North Bay.
And exactly. So, but I don't expect them to go 2 wins in 15 games anymore, right? But that being said, they probably played themselves out of a playoff spot. And North Bay kind of looks like they are showing what we kind of expected them. They went in 2 years in a row, and when that happens in the OHL for a lot of teams that aren't London, you end up with, a lengthy rebuild or a hard drop off, kind of like what Windsor went through. And now we're starting to see it with North Bay, even though they had a strong start. And then they're going to make some trades at the deadline to move away from, Luca Romani, I believe, would be there since we played North Bay.
Anthony Romani.
Anthony Romani. Why did I say Luca?
Luca Pinelli, probably.
Luca Pinelli, yes.
All those Italian boys.
Yes. So they're probably going to move him. Right. With that being said, the Ice Dogs got a gift in Loshko. Do you move him because they're guaranteed a playoff? Not guaranteed. I would say it's a 90% certain that the Ice Dogs will probably make the playoffs, right? As long as they don't bottom out here. But if they do, it's like next year is probably our window. If we're being honest, next year and the year following is really going to be our last, chance before they've got to kind of retool again. You got to get something back, I think, for Loshko. Or do you hold them for, the first playoff opportunity in 5 years? Because we've always just talked about just don't make any trade. But then you start to think of like, okay, we're not going to get anything for Loshko. And I guarantee there's probably some teams that really want Flores and Van Vliet, But, I don't know. What would you expect to see, come the trade deadline if, let's say, they stay right around where they are, fourth in the conference?
I think you already made your trade of your overager. I think you traded Gavin Bryan already. You keep these other 3 on the team, because if you think that you want to win a round in the playoffs, you need to have Owen Flores, Noah Van Vliet, and Andre Loshko on the team. And I think that's the main goal this year for the team, is to get in the playoffs, get that 1 round of experience, and the next 2 years. And I know there's rumors about possible bidding for the 2027 Memorial Cup. We know Kitchener is going to be involved in that as well. Niagara could get in on that. So you want to make sure that you don't give up your good young assets for that 2027 year, in case that is going to be the year that you would want to host an event like that. You want to be competitive, unlike the last time where they tried to host it. But I think you stay put with those guys. I think you really have a solid roster here of young players. You're going to get Asadorian back and Paris back, hopefully by the end of December is what we're hearing for both those players. Chinowski and Blake Aerosmith both should be fine. They were both banged up in the Peterborough game, so we want to see what they can do with a healthy lineup, with everybody kind of within where they should be in the lineup, that depth that they've kind of been missing with those injuries. To me, they have 3 solid lines that can score when everybody's in the lineup. So, and you've made that trade for Aerosmith as a younger player. You gave up 2/3 to do that. I think that they're going to stay put here. I really don't expect a massive move for one of those guys like a Quentin Musty or a Jet Luchenko, or those names that have kind of been floating around. I think those are moves you make the next 2 years, not this year. Keep that young core together. Don't, mess with that. Don't mess with the team chemistry, in the room as well. Kevin and Loshko are the guys to lead you up front with those next guys to come up with Zada, Rubrick, and Waslin and Crete. To me, I don't want to see massive moves made where multiple picks are going out the window and multiple players. They need to remain competitive down the stretch to make the playoffs, 1, and to 2, at least, give them some experience of having 1 round or going to a game 7 or maybe even getting to round 2.
I completely agree with not trading for Musty, for example, and going in now. I'm talking about, you mentioned the Memorial Cup bid. That would indicate that they're not really as much playing for this year, but they're playing for those next 2 years. Trading Loshko, you're going to get a second, more than likely, impactful draft picks, or even maybe 07s or 08, right? That would fit that. That's what I was alluding to. Do you think that's a possibility? I personally would love to see them just kind of go, about it. But again, the issue is that if you don't get assets for them, right, your draft pick is not going to be what it was the last couple of years. Your draft pick is not going to be a top 4 pick. So that player is more than likely not going to be heavily leaned on like Robrick and Wasselin have both been. So, like that's just where I wonder if, come the deadline, they don't move Lashko. And yes, I agree. They made the move of Gavin Bryan, and maybe they could have just done that earlier if that's the case. But again, we don't know. The season was so unexpected, I think, from everyone that isn't Ben Boudreau and the players on that team, right? Again, it's just objectively looking at it. We just expected the playoffs, and I don't even expect it might be a bit of a stretch, just given how the history of the team has gone. But I'm curious to see what happens. I don't know if I'd be upset. Again, I know how the cycle works in the OHL. It's so hard because you have such a small window for a lot of these teams. And I'm just very curious if they're right around 4th and they're not among the top, it's going to be very difficult to beat Barrie and Oshawa, in my opinion, and even Kingston. I think it's just going to be very difficult to beat one of them.
Even within your division, Brampton could even get going, even though they're going to lose some guys for the World
Brampton,
Juniors.
Number 1 team in the CHL coming in Canada and coming into the year, right? But maybe you win a round because it's Sudbury. Or it's probably Brampton. And it's like, that getting that playoff experience, at least one round, is huge. Getting people in the building. That's another thing. Like that, the energy in the building has not been very high, and I understand why. Again, the last couple of years have been rough. But that being said, there's no way that the casual fan or just like locals that maybe don't pay attention every game of the Ice Dogs, but when there's a playoff round, that everyone pays attention, right? And that's huge for the team because once the casual fan realizes, hey, this team's in the playoffs, next season they're like, okay, the season's starting. This might be, and I think that'll kind of trickle down. But I don't know. I've wrestled with that thought of Lashko and Flores and Van Vliet and what happens at the trade deadline because I wouldn't want to touch any of the 07s, but the overagers, it's just I would be okay with either, by the way. With either decision they made. I'm just curious as what management does. Because again, like you mentioned, they're going to try for the Memorial Cup, and they have a much higher chance this year than they did 2 years ago, or last year, simply because the team will be competitive, So anyways, interesting times, and this next road trip is probably going to determine what happens, I think, because if let's say they win, 7 of their next 9 games, right? I could see a situation where there's another Aerosmith type trade where they're not going all in, moving all of their picks, but they go and get some more help that is more of a perimeter player or maybe an extra forward. But we're also going to get Asadorian and Paris back, but maybe just insurance for them because they both dealt with injuries. So
I look at it as if they're going to get talent back that can play, I'm all for it. If
that's
the
what
right
I think,
trade,
yeah.
Because I don't want another situation happening where they trade away a couple of guys and just get draft picks back, and then they have holes up and down the lineup that they need to fill when they're trying to be a decent playoff team. So if the right moves there, make it. But right now, like I'm pleased with the way the roster has been constructed. They've obviously have a goal with the way that they want to go about it with Wes Consorti and the management staff. Ben Boudreau and the coaching staff's done a good job of developing the young players and getting them to play to a certain identity, and when they play that team defense, they win. When they don't, they lose, and he continues to make sure that he hones in on the style and the way that they're playing, and we've seen some mistakes, again, against Flint and Peterborough most recently with the defensive coverage, and that's, concerning in that sense, but we talk about things that need to, that we need to see in December. The penalty kill needs to be a lot better. They're 16th in the OHL in that. The power play sitting around mid right now, but they've had a lot of opportunities as of late and just haven't been able to capitalize. So when you look at those guys coming back from injury, and you look at the specialty teams specifically, I think that's one area where you say if they have a good month of December, we'll kind of see where they're at come January, and if they're still. If they're first in the Central in January, or they're 4th or 5th, maybe they do go out and get a player instead of making a move the other way, which we've seen the last couple of years, or if they, like you said, move a player off the roster. But I think this month of December is really going to be the tall tale of, make or break. They're going to be a team that is going to be a contender for a playoff spot, or if they're going to look to strategically sell at the deadline.
What would you want them to do?
I want them to stay put. I really do. I think
I'm actually on that as well. Like, part of me wants them to make the hard move, like what they did with Gavin. It's a very, very tough move, but that was simply because the team was doing so well. I don't know how you could argue. Obviously the human side of things are a little bit different from the business side, but I'm okay with them not trading anyone either, but part of me is just like, man, this isn't your year. Like, it would be a miracle. And then no matter what, you're going to go up against London with 12 NHL drafted players. And I just don't know, if Niagara has the horses to even get through the couple rounds. I just think that even 2 games at home is so valuable to the franchise that regardless, and if they can get there and get some big assets back, I agree with you that I don't know if I want picks. And, that's obviously tough. But the crazy thing is that so far this year, they've won all those deals, even though the pundits and everyone we talked about, Blair Scott and Brody, like you do that deal 100% again. But when you looked at it with the Tristan Bertuzzi and like a 3-way deal they did, it looked really heavily skewed to the other guys, the other team. And I would argue that the IceDogs probably won that trade. So I don't know. I'm cool with it with them staying. But like I said, I think that because of their November, they've put this now on it would have never been an option, and now it's like we might have to make some tough choices here.